Hello, my name is Evangeline Reed, and today I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to do policy research for your Social Work 3150 class. I am an instructional services librarian with Aurora University, and you can contact me at eread@aurora.edu. Today, I will be teaching you how to find the information you need for your assignment, but I'll also be helping you prepare to do this type of research in the future when you are in the social work field or when you're a professional. There is a research guide for this class. It is available with links to all kinds of great resources, including most of what we'll be talking about today. libguides.aurora.edu/3150, or if you can find it on the library website when you click research, and then sort by subject. So let's talk about how you find a policy. I'm going to be talking about finding federal policies today, but you'd follow a lot of similar routes to find a policy that's not federal. For example, an Illinois policy. One thing that we like to do is go ahead and visit a professional organization website and see what they're talking about. What is it that they're interested in? What is it that they're paying attention to? So the National Association of Social Workers has an advocacy page, and I highly recommend checking out both their policy issues section and the legislative alerts for ideas about things that are pertinent to your field and that other people are paying attention to. GovTrack.us is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and it's one of the easiest ways to browse legislation. They have the option to find legislation that affects you, and you can sort by different topics. In this case, one of the options is families. And the way that they have organized these topics is a little bit more user-friendly, which is why I always recommend it to students. You can also browse a lot of different ways. Once you find a article you like, a bill you like, you'll be able to browse the information they have there, which again is more user-friendly and has a few things you won't see on an official Congress website. You will notice this webpage has ads, which is unlike an official Congress website. This is to help support their work since they are a nonprofit. The position statement section on govtrack.us is especially useful for your purposes because part of what you want to do is figure out how people are responding to this and what kinds of conversations are unfolding. These position statements are sourced from another great policy source, ProPublica, another nonprofit, nonpartisan source. But sometimes it's hard to find things on their website, and so I love the fact that govtrack.us will take you right there. This resource also includes the history of the bill as well as the ability to see the full vote for each time the bill came before Congress. This information is just a little bit more easy to understand here, but it is also available on the official location to read about bills, which is congress.gov. I always recommend when you find a bill, even if you're using another great website, come on back to congress.gov because this is going to be the most official and most up-to-date source for your information. On the homepage, you're able to search the current Congress, meaning the current sitting session of Congress, which is what you need for this assignment. You can also look at the most viewed bills right there. When you scroll down, you'll have the option to look at the legislation that is being sponsored by different politicians, by different people in Congress, which is one way to find something you might be interested in. For example, you could look at and see what the majority leader is interested in or what the Speaker of the House is interested in. You can also, when you use the advanced search, allow yourself to choose by the policy area or the legislative subject terms. Policy area is pretty broad and so not always super useful, but the legislative subject terms can get pretty specific and be really fun because when you click on these buttons, you're able to browse and select ones that are a good fit for you. Advanced search also allows you to choose where you're searching. So for example, if you're searching for the word abortion because you want things related to that topic, you could choose that it's only in the latest version of the bill, or you could choose that it's in any version of the bill. You can choose that it's in the title, if it's in the summary, if it's in the text of the bill. So you can get a little bit more nitpicky if you're having any trouble with finding what you want. This can be a good way to be a little bit more specific with your query. Once you've done a search, you're able to then filter. So on the left-hand side, you see a list of different options. You want to make sure it's in the current Congress. Usually it defaults to that, but double check that. Then you want to look at the status of the legislation. Has it passed the House? Has it just been introduced? Is it going to be signed by the president? Where are we at with that? The subject area is something we talked about before, the policy area. That helps you filter, so you can say that you're very interested in things related to abortion that are somehow related to science and technology, perhaps. Or in this case, when you're looking at the subcommittee, that's another way to kind of filter your results. I would be very interested to see the types of results that come up that were part of the Indigenous Peoples of the United States subcommittee, for example, or even the committee. Once you've found a bill, you need to be able to understand what's happening. So let's take a closer look at this bill, an example here. You can see the title is right up at the top. It confirms for us that we are looking at a bill from the 117th Congress, that's this current Congress, and it also allows us to see that the bill started in the House of Representatives. You have H.R. 4521. Then we also have a title, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see that there's more information about this bill. The CBO, the cost estimate, is a really useful tool to get a sense for how much money it would cost to implement this bill, as well as potential revenue. The policy area really helps you, once you've found something you're interested in, find more things on that topic. So, for example, this one is related to science, technology, and communications. So you could see more things related to that policy area, but if you hit View Subjects, you also have the option to see all of the legislative subjects that are ticked on this box, by this article, this bill. And these are linked, so you can click through to find more about more items on that topic. This center area has the meat and potatoes of your bill. It will tell you who sponsored this bill, so who started it all. You can see the latest action, what's happened most recently, and was it recent or was it pretty long ago? The more recent it is, the more current you'll have to be when you're looking at articles and other information online. The tracker gives you a sense of where it is in its process from being introduced to becoming law. I should clarify that the further along it is, usually the more information you'll find about it, because it's been in the news, it's been in conversation, more politicians have encountered it and spoken about it. And so when it comes to a bill for your assignment where you need to have research, finding a bill that's a little bit further along, at the very least not just introduced, will help you be more successful. On this page, at the bottom you'll see that there are tabs. The tabs are different pages. You don't want to just get lost and think you've seen everything once you've scrolled to the bottom of the page. The place that it starts on is the summary, which is very useful. It's written by the Congressional Research Committee, which is part of the Library of Congress. It's a nonpartisan government organization. Super useful way to understand what's happening. The text is the full text of the entire bill, often quite long. So you don't want to start there. You want to start with the summary. And the co-sponsors lets you know who else has signed on to your bill. You'll also see the option to look at which summary you're looking at or which text you're looking at, etc. And it's really important to pay attention to this because there's usually multiple versions depending on how far along the bill is. So if it was just introduced, it might just have one version. But if it's passed the House, it might already have two versions. So paying attention to which version you're looking at and seeing what those changes have been throughout it is really essential. So let's say that you found your bill and you want to do a little more research. How do you go about doing that? Step one is figuring out what you want to put into search boxes, right? And this is what we call keyword brainstorming. So you might have a research question related to, or a bill related to racial profiling in America. And while those are some good keywords to start off with, you also want to think about other ways to say those words in case you didn't come up with the perfect one right off the bat, or in case you need to be broader if you haven't gotten enough results, or narrower if you're getting too many results. So in this case, we use examples like a broader term would be racial discrimination or racism. For America, we could also refer to United States or USA. The exact word you use is the exact word the database is going to find for you, so it's important to be specific and careful with the words we choose. Now, the other part about this that's a bit tricky is the name for your policy. The policy in this case that we're using as our example is H.R. 4521, United States Innovation Competition Act of 2021. So you'll see there that we have the numbers. We could search by H.R. 4521, but you'll often find that very few things list the number. I'm not saying don't search with it. give it a shot because it's the most specific way to refer to it, but often you'll find that it's not used in that way. Now, you'll also notice that this has a Senate number, an S-1260, because once this bill passed into the Senate, it changed considerably and they assigned it its own number. So it's important to search around and figure out all the different ways that a bill could be referred to so that you can find all of the information about it. The short title is usually listed on the bill or sometimes in the text. You'll also find the full title in the text. In this case, it's incredibly long, and you probably would never see someone use it, but it's good to know. You'll find that sometimes other people, especially other politicians, refer to a bill in a different way. In this case, the Biden administration referred to this bill as the America Creating Opportunities for Manufacturing, Preeminence in Technology and Economic Strength Act of 2022, shortened to COMPETES. This is because there was another bill previously known as the COMPETES Act. So the COMPETES Act of 2022 is another short way that people refer to this bill. So understanding, kind of collecting all the different ways that someone might refer to this bill will then help you search more effectively to find information written about the bill. And unfortunately, it doesn't end when you find that title on congress.gov. It does take a little bit of sleuthing and kind of collecting terms as you continue to do your research. Now, one of the places you're going to want to search for information will be the library database. Library database has access to a lot of information that is often behind paywalls or otherwise inaccessible to you, and a lot of really good information. So I always recommend you start here. You can start with Spartan Search because you're looking for something so specific that it's probably best to start with a search engine that searches across everything we have, like Spartan Search. When you hit the little magnifying glass, it'll open up a full screen, and that gives you the option to choose Advanced Search. Advanced Search allows you to separate out your concepts. So in this case, we could put racial discrimination on one line and America on another line, and we would get articles related to both America and racial discrimination. This "and" here is the default, but you can also choose or not. These are called Boolean operators. Or helps us narrow something down, broaden something. So if you're saying racial discrimination or racial, I'm using the wrong word. Let's use the example that's here, peanut butter or nut butter. That gives us a slightly larger scope, right? Because not all nut butter is peanut butter. Similarly, you can use "not" on the other end to knock something out of your list. So let's say we're doing racial discrimination and we keep getting things related to stop and frisk. Maybe we actually are not interested in that element and we want to focus on other things. We could say "not stop and frisk." The any field option is the default. That searches anywhere in the article, the title, the summary, the description of it, like the metadata, anything. But sometimes you want to choose to do a subject search because you want it to be about that topic rather than just mentioning it. We also have the option to limit by the start date. This is useful, especially if you're researching something that has been going on for a really long time and you want something that's more current. Searches are not always going to be just 2 terms. You can add a new line, but if you find that you aren't getting enough results, you might be too specific and you can take a line away. Once you've done a search, you'll have options on the left to filter and refine your results. Things like available online or peer-reviewed journals are really useful. You can also sort by the resource type, aka an article versus a book versus something else altogether, or the subject if you want to filter to find ones that are most relevant to what you're interested in. Once you have applied your filters, you can click the little lock to lock them in place. Something that's really important to understand is that the database assumes the words aren't connected to each other unless you tell it otherwise. So in this case, mental health or United States will only be found together if you put quotation marks around them. So if I do quotation mark, mental health, close quotation mark, the database will find those 2 words together and in that order. Whereas if I didn't, it would just find an article that had both the word mental and the word health somewhere in it. Wildcards are an asterisk that you put on the end of a word to allow the database to find anything that comes after it. So in this case, if we use the word Latin and then do a little asterisk, it will also find any result that is Latina, Latino, Latinx, Latinas, Latinos, Latinos, possessive. It could find any variation on that, and probably also a few things that we don't want. But in this case, it would give us a lot more results rather than having to individually search for Latina versus Latino versus Latinx, etc. So let's say we put together a little search. We used our phrase searching here, racial profiling as one phrase, United States as another with our quotation marks. We want both those things together, and we don't really care where they're found, so we keep the defaults for the field and the and. We find an article here. You'll see that the things that we are interested in, the things we put in our search, are highlighted. That's how the database is finding it, right? You can see right away that this article is peer-reviewed, and if we click through, we'll see a full list of subject headings when you scroll down. These are really useful for helping us identify terms that we can use for future searches, because these are words that the database identifies as being what this article is about, and it's ones that it recognizes. We use a consistent language, so if we were to use, for example, racial bias, there would be other articles that have also been categorized as about racial bias, and because it's a subject heading, it would be particularly useful in a subject search instead of an any field search. Once you found an article, you might want to save it, and I encourage you to do so. Don't want to have to redo your research. You can save the permalink, you can email it to yourself, or under View Online, you'll often have multiple options that you can click through to view the item, to download it, or however else you would like to save it. The important thing is not to save the web address that's up at the top of the screen. The way we normally copy and paste things to send to our friends or whatever else isn't going to work, because in a library database, it's session specific. So I encourage you to not do that, not bookmark the page, because it might not get you back where you need to go. Instead, save that permalink, email it to yourself, download it. One of those options is going to be a better fit. If we were in person, I would now encourage you to try an activity. If you are watching and you'd like to follow along, give it a shot. Basically, I want you to find 2 bills that you're interested in, identify the sponsor and the status of the bill, and do some preliminary research to figure out whether there are articles that are written about this bill, whether other people are talking about this bill, whether you can find information about it to do your research for your paper, and then decide which of them you think is a better fit for your assignment. Feel free to do that on your own. So let's talk about where you search for what. Now, your information needs are not all going to be the same. Depending on what you're looking for, you need to look in different places. So first of all is defining your question. What is it that you're trying to find? I know you have quite a few different things you have to answer about your bill in order to fulfill your assignment's requirements. So the policy, we started off by saying we want to go to an original source, a primary source, like congress.gov, or if you're searching Illinois bills, ilga.gov. Then you want to find more information about a policy or its implications. govtrack.us has links to statements from politicians. It has all kinds of great resources. But you also might want to look in a library database to find reports or academic articles. You might want to look at a trusted news source, whether it's online or in a library database, because like I said, many things are behind paywalls that you wouldn't be able to access online that you can access through a library database as a student. One example is the Policy File Index, which is linked on the research guide. This has articles and reports about policy, and if I looked up the policy or the bill that I was looking at before, you would quickly find that there is a report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office about it. Now, another type of information you may need would be reactions to the policy. Statements from politicians, political parties, professional organizations, these are all really useful. And the politicians are already sourced on that govtrack.us we talked about. But you might also want to look up opinion pieces in newspapers or opinions from experts and academics, people like lawyers or social workers. And looking in library databases can give you some thoughts on what people are thinking about that policy specifically or that issue in general. You also might want to learn about current events related to the policy. Congressional Research Services, that's what we talked about earlier, they do the summary for the bill, but they also make reports about a lot of other things. And this is what your congressmen and women are reading and using to understand what's happening in the world around them. So that is a really wonderful research service. For example, we can learn about the previous Competes Act as well as the attempts to bring it back. We could learn about the current science, technology, engineering, and mathematics engineering and mathematics education in America. And we could continue researching any one of the number of elements within our bill to understand a little bit more of the context. You also need to learn probably some of the history and debate about the issue before the policy. And one of the most useful things for that are current event summaries, which the library has 2 databases that offer this type of resource, which is really useful. You might also look to past news. So again, things that have been written in the past about current events that were current at the time. Books are a really great way to get an overview, and we have a lot of ebooks that you can access online, and of course, articles. CQ Researcher is one of those library databases with detailed summaries of current events. So in this case, my bill was related to U.S. trade policy, so I looked that up and I found the background, chronology, pros and cons, all kinds of useful information here. Now, you're not only going to be searching in library databases or on government websites necessarily, so I wanted to make sure that you feel confident figuring out how to navigate that. And one of the most useful tools is fact-checking. Now, you have a smart brain and you're able to do some of this yourself, but sometimes it's good to go to a professional. PolitiFact, Snopes, factcheck.org, plenty of organizations are well trusted and they fact-check statements from politicians, social media posts, all kinds of things. When you're looking at a source online, one way to get a feeling for what type of source it is to look at the domain name, which is the ending of that website. So a .gov, a .org, a .edu. A .gov is, of course, a government website. .org is an organization, often a nonprofit, but the quality of that information can vary quite widely. .edu is an educational institution, like aurora.edu. You can search by the type of site. This is particularly useful for a site.gov and then your topic. In this case, I put a space between the colon and the period, but you wouldn't do that when you were really searching. This would only give you government organization websites about your topic. But you might need to still ask a few questions because you want to make sure you have good sources. This is something you're already doing every day. If you look at a news story, you probably ask yourself, is this from like a satire website? Is this from The Onion or Reductress or some sort of comedy thing? Or is this a real news article? Similarly, when you go to look up lyrics for a song, you probably go to a website that you trust instead of just Googling and finding any old website. They could be wrong, or it could be like, full of viruses, whatever it is, right? I like to use Genius. You also use it when someone tells you information. If someone tells you they saw something or they heard someone did something, you probably ask follow-up questions. How do you know that? Did you see it yourself or did someone tell you? You ask yourself some questions about the trustworthiness of the person who's telling you that information, your source. Are they trustworthy? And you probably also wonder why they're telling you. Are they trying to get you to do something? What exactly is the purpose of them telling you this information? And that's basically what you need to do with a source. There is a mnemonic called the CRAP test. It stands for currency, reliability, authority, and purpose. And it helps you ask these questions more carefully of a source to figure out if it's a good thing to use. So it's very similar to what we were talking about before. Purpose. Why are they telling you this? Does it seem biased, or is it opinion? Is it a fact? Again, is it comedy? What's their goal with this? Often you'll see a website where they're trying to convince you to buy something, and that can immediately be a red flag that they aren't necessarily in it for the right reasons. The authority tells you whether this is a trustworthy source. And often it's about their credentials. So with your friend, it might be just that you trust them and they've told the truth in the past. But with a source, you can say who wrote it, who published it, do we generally trust them, and what are their credentials? If I wrote an article about a public policy issue, That could be interesting. I probably did some good research, but if someone who's actually has, a doctorate degree in public policy or in social work wrote about that same issue, that would be a much more authoritative source. Reliability is about backing up the claims you're being made and understanding it. So if your friend tells you they aren't from someone who heard it from someone else, who heard it from someone else, that's much less trustworthy than if they saw it themselves, right? So the evidence for the claim being made, whether it's because they saw it themselves, whether it's because they link back to where they got that information from and that source is authoritative, however it is, backing up their claims is a really important element. Peer-reviewed sources are kind of the highest level of that because we'll talk about in a second. That's really high quality, high reliability. And currency is the information up to date. Information can be good in the moment and no longer good later. If I write today on the internet, I have a puppy, and you read it 3 years from now, I don't have a puppy anymore, right? I have a full-grown dog. So it's important to pay attention to that. Peer-reviewed is probably something you've heard of before, but if you find articles that are peer-reviewed, that means it's really high quality in the sense of the fact that it was reviewed by experts before publication for quality. It was edited, made sure that the research was of good, met certain criteria, all of that stuff. So that usually means that you're looking at something that's of good academic quality. I always recommend that students go back to the original source. If you find a news article that's talking about something, go back to the original source. If you find a page talking about a bill, go look at the real bill. It doesn't mean that the other source can't be of use, but you want to make sure you're getting your information right from the source. I don't expect you to have learned everything about research today. There is that research guide on the library website. If you click on the research tab on the home page, you can see it under social work for Social Work 3150. On the homepage, you also have the option to chat with a librarian, to press help and submit a question if we're away, or to view the tutorials there. You can also book an appointment with a librarian either in person or over Zoom, and we would be happy to help you. You can do that on Academic Support Net, which you can find on Okta. So just to review what we talked about today, when you're doing a search, think about what you need and how you can find it, and then choose where to search based on what it is you need. Remember, when you're doing a search, it's very useful to use the advanced search so you can separate out your concepts. And then when you're figuring out what to put in there, brainstorm your keywords a little bit. Think broader, narrower, related, and sometimes think about the most formal or official version of a keyword. And don't be afraid. In fact, go right ahead and definitely borrow the language of a database, especially things like subject headings. Using those in your search will only make it stronger. And last but not least, no matter where you find your source, even if it's in a library database, make sure you check the quality of your source and ask some questions about it if you're not sure. Thank you for your time today. Please contact a librarian or your teacher with any questions related to your research.